Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Scott Anton. I manage business development with Gideon Taylor, and we are excited to have you guys join us for SMU's presentation of their EMPLID request eForm. This is going to be for those of you who have not used GT eForms to engage external participants, folks outside of your organization, this is going to be a very educational session for you guys. We're excited to have SMU present on it. As a little bit of housekeeping, this is being recorded, so everyone here will get a link to the recording a few days after we wrap up the webinar, so probably sometime early next week. You can expect to see that in an email. Feel free to share that with others in your organization if they might be interested in watching some of this. As you have questions, feel free to pose those in either the chat or the Q&A. We'll keep an eye on those during the session and handle those as we can during the session. Otherwise, we'll try to make sure that we respond to those by the end. And I was informed by one of my co-workers that we should put a plug in for the new GT eForms advisory group. There was just an inaugural meeting preceding this webinar. If for any of you that are involved in the HUG organization for higher education or public sector, that's available to you. It's a fantastic resource. There were like 60 people that attended the initial meeting. There are well over 100 campuses in higher education around the world that are using GT eForms. So we expect that to be a very active forum for people to collaborate and support each other and help each other with questions as they come up with eForms design and development and support. So we are really excited to be helping to support that group, and it's got some fantastic leadership at the top. So I encourage any of you who are involved in HUG to go ahead and sign up for the GT eForms advisory group. That being said, I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to Priyanka and Perry to tell you more about the EMPLID request eForm that they created to allow for folks outside of SMU to submit information, necessary data, so that an EMPLID can be created for them. It's all yours.
Thank you so much, Scott, and thank you guys for having us present on our form, and thank you to those of you who have joined us to learn more about it. I am Perry Doan, and I'm a senior PeopleSoft applications developer at SMU, and Priyanka Nigam is an HCM senior business analyst, and we work at beautiful SMU. You saw that picture before of Dallas Hall. It's just a beautiful private university. The campus is gorgeous. We have about 12,000 students, 8 schools, and we have an additional campus in Taos, New Mexico. And we support campus solutions, HCM, financials, all on 9.2, Tools 8.5.9, and we're on Oracle 12G. So as our agenda, we want to talk to you just a tiny bit about the project of how we launched that whole form. We'll show you the workflow of how participants can get in and do their data entry. And then we'll go through some of the configuration and special features of the form. So how did the form come about? It all started through the adjunct initiative, because at SMU we have an adjunct onboarding process that's a bit of a challenge. And I've heard that it can be at other, institutions. All the sub-processes that you see here in this process flow are quite different depending on what school we're talking about, and even within departments within schools, they might have differences and things like that. So there's just a lot there that we've been working towards to improve. One of the things that departments were giving us feedback on was challenges around request of the EMPLIDs for their new adjuncts before they could even start any of the other processes there in line. So that that is where this initially came about, but we do use the form for other populations. So in terms of the project, back in 2020, I attended a GT masterclass that opened my eyes and introduced me to the GT token framework. And I immediately knew when I saw this presentation, or even before I joined, I was like, oh, I bet this is going to be the key to unlocking one of the biggest challenges that we have in terms of getting those EMPLID requests submitted and put through the system. So we did a year later, reached out to GT, and they agreed to help us create this form. And right before we launched the project, we did reach out to Andrea at Berkeley, and she was very, very kind to share her experience. And through that conversation, found out that it was really Berkeley who sort of their use case was how the token framework was kind of developed and came about. So we just owe a debt of gratitude to that school, and just to Andrea. I mean, now she's one of the leading participants in this advisory group, and I'm just really thrilled that she is a part of that, and just so thankful for the way that she's always willing to share knowledge and experience with the rest of us. So, at any rate, we started the project a year later, and we had three great GT resources assigned to our project. And really, within about 3 months, we had a solution to start looking at, right? We did, the project took about 5 months, because there was user testing and a lot of training and things like that, but relatively quick project in my mind. So at the highest level, what we needed is just a way to securely collect PI data from external users so that we could generate IDs for them. And as you'll see through the presentation, we'll try to show you some of the benefits that we gained from creating the creation of this form. So not only do we have external users able to submit their data securely, but we also have an increased um, turnaround time. So it's dramatically improved because HR now has an efficient way to manage and act on those requests. And it automates the data entry of that PII data directly from the form into the system. And it's automatically generating those email notifications to let people know where they are on this process. And then we've also been able to, you know, continue that integration to search match so that we don't end up with duplicate IDs in the system. And it's allowed HR to use this form as a jumping off point for completion of additional business processes that they need to take care of, like the background checks and the I-9s. And hopefully in the future we can automate those things, but right now it's just like, okay, here's an ID. Now let me go follow up on these additional steps. And then of course, it's a mobile friendly form that allows our external users to conveniently and easily fill out the form. So the form itself has a lot of features, and we think that you're probably mostly interested in learning about the token framework. So that's what I'll talk through first up front, but then we'll share some of the additional things that you see on this list. But before we get into that configuration and the technical aspects of the form, Priyanka is going to walk us through the workflow of the form, which we have two different kinds, as you can see on this slide. We have data entry by subject and we have data entry by initiator. And she will show you diagrams for both of the workflows so you can understand the differences, but then she'll walk through an example of the data entry by subject, which is the one that uses the token framework.
Thank you, Perry. Hello all, I'm Priyanka Nigam, HCM Business Analyst at SMU, and I will show you how all this looks from an end user perspective. So EMPLID request form is created as a 3-entity workflow form, as you can see here. An initiator who wants ID created for their selected applicant, the subject, which is applicant itself, and the approver, who's usually our HR people here at SMU. In data entry by subject, the initiator only needs to supply subject's name and email address to initiate the process. After that, the subject receives an email with the time limit hyperlink, which is our token framework, to access the form and submit their personal information. The approver then receives a completed form for approval and creates a new EMPLID if it already doesn't exist in the system. Once that is done, automated email is generated to communicate the EMPLID back to the initiator, who in turn now can communicate back to the subject. So the other workflow, which we will not go too much into detail, is the data entry by initiator. In this form, we bypass the token invitation to the external participant. It allows the initiator himself or herself to enter the PI data, which is already available to them. There are very limited cases, and we usually use it for third-party contractual employees who are managed by a point person in HR. We will now go through the data entry by subject workflow in detail, which involves our token workflow. So as a form initiator, you'll click on EMPLID request style, which resides on PeopleSoft homepage, and it takes the initiator to the landing page. The landing page provides end user information about population definitions. This is really to guide the initiator on the correct population to select when they add information in the form. This is important because this population is deciding what fields to hide and what to show and what to make them required based on this employee population. The initiator clicks on the Start task, and it takes them to the form where they select the population through the drop-down. The security role, which is assigned to the initiator, determines all the valid list of population that they will choose from. In this example, we will just go through the adjunct faculty that we want to hire, create an EMPLID for. This is possibly the easiest form. As you can see, it just have this field as an initiator. Initiator, once selects the population, all they need is their name and the employee and the email address to kick off the form. The home org number that you can see here is only required for the population that requires a background check. And we will go through the setup where we make these fields required and not required based on the population. Once the form is submitted, the initiator can see a confirmation page. The view approval route also shows them where the next stop is and approval route for it. So in here, we can see that it is sent to our SMU guest, which is the external participant. It is then routed to the EC approver, which we have given a fancy name to our HR approvers. Remember the first page where they were selecting the population, that population also derives what approval route you will be getting. For example, for the population such as sponsored users, the form is routed to the parking and the ID card offices. And in case of former student population, they are routed to registrar office. Now, as an subject or external participants, once the initiator submits the form, the external subject receives a time token invitation to fill out the form. You can see on a link on the screen that there is a link which will take the subject directly to the PeopleSoft page for them to fill out the information. Subject on this page fills out various PI data, and they are marked as required and not required, or to show or not show based on the population. To enter the address, if you can see at the bottom, there is an enter address link. They need to click on that link. And this opens up a new modal window where we have integrated the clean address. This helps addresses to be very accurate in our system. On the left, you can see the clean address warnings for a bad address. And on the right, you can see the clean address has populated the city and state for the correct address. Once they've done that, the form takes you back to the original page, and the subject completes all the required field, and they were prompted and required to acknowledge information they have entered. The subjects, once done that, click on complete to finish the form. This is just the data entry form for them. Once they do that, they receive the confirmation page, as well as an email notification confirming that they have successfully submitted the form. As an initiator, you would want to know what is happening to your form. So Initiator have a way to go into history and check the status of their submitted form. Over here, it's the same form that they have submitted, and you can see that, and the Initiator can see that it is already submitted by the SMU guest, and now it is pending approval from our EC approver, or HR. In the cases where the initiator notices that there is a delay and subject has not taken any action within the 72 hours, by the way, that is the limit for a token expiration, they can go and revise the form using the revise task. They would just open the form and click on generate new token. This option can be used when initiator want to just update some information, for example, email address, and send it to a new email address. They can use that. The good thing and interesting thing about this is that all the information is disabled if subjects has already taken an action on the form. Now, as HR approver, I will get an email notification, as well as when I log in, there is a notification sent to my notification panel, which I can click, and it will take me to my task for approving the form. Perry will go through the security, but it is set so that approver cannot modify any bio demo data provided by the subject. All they can do is run a search match from the left bottom that you can see. And if the ID does not exist in the system, they can just trigger to creation of a new ID. So next the approver clicks this run search match, and over here it opened a modal window where the delivered search match page is launched, displaying the results. This is where we see the search match integration. They can click the carry ID if they find a match, or they can click cancel if they don't find the match. In both the cases, the form will take back to you. In carry ID, it will carry the ID. The first screenshot here shows that the approver found a matching ID in the system, and see how it says SMU ID number and with the name and ID. So approval will click approve, and this ID will be communicated to the initiator. In the second screenshot, we showed that the approver did not find the match. He or she create new. They did the toggle yes and no, so they did the create new on here, and they provided an effective date when the ID will be created in the system. So this ID will be created on the CS side first, on the campus solution sides, and then it will sync to the HCM wall using the person services framework. So this is a very quick overview of our workflow. It's very simple for us, and now Perry will take you to all the information about how we actually designed it.
Priyanka?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. There's a question that was posted by Diara. Is this all happening in PeopleSoft?
Yes. So in the very first screenshot where you saw a tile, so we have created this whole form, which is easily accessible on PeopleSoft, and it is all resides in PeopleSoft. It uses PeopleSoft database and everything.
It's on Campus Solutions.
Excellent.
Yeah,
and then
on the campus solution side. Mm-hmm.
The follow-up question was, is the search match comparing SSNs?
Yes.
So yes, at this time, so there is many delivered search matches that you can use, and the one which we are using is comparing the first SMU search match. So I believe this has a first name, last name, and the SSN match. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this one did match on that because I was using Snow White and I was using a bogus, SSN when I was doing this test run. But if I had provided an actual SSN that existed in the system, it would have found it with an earlier search number, and it would have nailed the person exactly that already exists.
So yeah, the search match can be configured based on your way you want to do the search match, actually.
Yeah, that's really the beauty of we requested this. We were like, well, we don't want to recreate the wheel on searching for existing IDs. Can we just somehow use delivered? And so we didn't even have to rethink our search parameters. We're just using what we are using everywhere else in our system.
Does that
Awesome.
answer your question? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Great.
Yeah, let's move on. Okay, so GT token framework. I stole a couple of slides from a presentation that they gave, and I linked it here. When you guys get this presentation, you'll be able to open up the Master Series webinar, which is out there on YouTube. And that was the thing that I was telling y'all. I was introduced to the framework through that webinar. And it goes through some of the steps. And one of the things that it does mention is that the token allows you to create an self-service user ID in the system. So I suppose that is how maybe at Berkeley, that's how they were doing it for their particular use case. The difference here in ours is that we're just using the SMU guest. We're not creating new guest profiles for every person individually. They're just using that one and leveraging that one user ID to do their data entry. This right here, again, borrowing from GT, just to quickly say that a token is the unique identifier that does not include any sensitive information and allows access to very specific content for a very specific purpose. So that's what makes it very secure. They also have a public portal guide out there. And again, I copied this slide from that public portal guide presentation. There's a whole document that you guys can look through. But in essence, a lot of what is outlined here in terms of like customizing that URL so that you can send that token out. Thankfully for us, we didn't really have to do any of this because we already had a public portal set up for the catalog search that we have, and then our account claiming process for new students and employees. So we already had all of the different pieces that are mentioned here, like the portal node, web profile, all of that was already done. So in essence, all that we had to do was create a PeopleSoft role and permission list that would allow access to the specific form pages in the GT framework, and then some of the web libraries, right? Like the clean address web library, and then the web services to update the GT log and the form status and things like that. And so once we had the role and permission list created, it was assigned to the SMU guest user profile, and that was it. In terms of the GT token framework, they have this configuration page that comes with the framework. And it, in essence, you can create one for a different form. So each form can have their own. In our case, we set it up for the token to expire after 72 hours or 3 days. It specifies here the root package of where the code is. It also has all of the URL information that it needs to transfer that information into the token. The token is primarily managed via workflow event hooks, right? So for example, you have your on submit click, and that's when the external participant submits it. The initiator submits it. It calculates the token, it calculates the number of days for expiration, and it inserts that expiration date. If they resubmit, they expire the old token, generate a new one. If they withdraw, it will expire the token. On the approve click, the token is also expired. And even though in the workflow, at the point of approval, it's already moved away from that guest user to the approver, and they wouldn't be able to access it. This is just another level of security that was added so that that token wouldn't be left out there. And then, of course, our token can expire with passage of time. And the initiator, as you saw earlier, can see that on the form. So just to show you real fast what that looks like in the code, there's our app package, the workflow events class. And then it points to the method library, which then has the GT framework application package, the G3 token app package, and then here are some of the methods that I've highlighted, just so you can get a visual. And I have a little picture here of what that app package looks like, of all the methods they are able to access through the framework. Another thing to show is that when we are in test user mode, we can also see the token itself and the expiration date as we're testing. Okay, so our population setup is a custom page that was created so that we can control the behavior of the form by population. And I'm showing you here two examples. One is our adjunct population and the Kelly temps. And notice how, like, for example, Kelly temps, we have a lot more fields that we're hiding and not requiring versus the ones over here on the adjunct side. The search match parameters are specified if we needed to have different ones for whatever reason. We use the same ones for everybody, but if we needed to change it for whatever reasons, we could. It also controls whether or not we want update information to go through. So for example, if a current ID is identified in the system and we don't have to create a new one, the question is, do we want to go ahead and update their biodemo data based on what they've supplied on the form? It gives us that flexibility. They also can specify like data entry by initiator, like you can see here on the Kelly temps. We have that HR representative that does all that data entry because they have their system that they're looking at, and so they just can go ahead and fill that data in. And then for me, the most important piece of this puzzle is like, what are the roles that are allowing, for a particular population to be initiated, and then who's going to approve it. In this case, both of these forms are approved by HR. But like Priyanka said, we have other forms that, or other populations where they go to the ID card office for approvals. So GT came up with a very elegant solution to hide, show, require fields on the form with smart sources on the visual ifs. And it makes it very easy to add or change population configuration without having to touch the form at all, which we really love. If we at any point decided that we wanted to add another data element to this form, then all we would need to do is follow sort of the pattern that they've developed for us here. And I can just show you real fast, like, for example, the date of birth, we have visual ifs for require and show. And then what it looks like here is that smart source of population required and, or population show are both there. So you would just follow that pattern to do what you need to do for the other data elements. This is just a visual of the logic parts for those smart sources. Okay, so that was the token framework. If you guys have more technical questions, I'm sure GT can help with that. I don't know anything about all the inner workings of that, but just moving on to our form security pieces. As you know, a lot of these forms do have layered security. So we have our PeopleSoft security that's controlling access to the tile and form, and then our web libraries and web services. And then we have the more granular level security handled by the GT layer. So where we have our participation rosters and some custom search records so that you can control row level security. And then we also have something interesting with this form where we're leveraging DDA. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that delivered functionality within Campus Solutions that allows for masking of SSN and DOB. We're also implementing that within the form so that people, when they go view a form that's already been completed, it will mask it. All right, so in terms of the form task security, here's let's see. Oh, first, notice we have the CSGT admin. Of course, they're everywhere, so they can look at any step. But then aside from that, if we look at the add, we have our EC initiators who are able to access the form. Then we have in the evaluate task, we have the SMU public, the SMU guest participant, and then the all approvers. And then for the update, only the initiators can go there. And then on the view, we have initiators and approvers. I have ability to look that up. And then in terms of those rosters, they are people code rosters. So I wanted to show you just a visual of what that looks like in the code. So in the filter that is running behind the scenes, the first thing it will go do is say, oh, well, what population is this form for? And once it knows what it's for, it's going to grab that role that's associated with it. And then based on the role, it's going to spit out a list of users that have that role assigned and provide it back to the form. In terms of the search views, we have the update task view that, yeah, that's the one I put first, right? That only allows users to update the form that they have initiated themselves. And then the view task allows users to pull forms that they've initiated, or for approvers, in the case of approvers, it allows them to view all forms for the populations they have access to. And I don't have a screenshot of this, but as far as like the fields, when you go to the search page and you have like your search fields at the top and the search results at the bottom, we're using the default search page that GT offers. And then there's now a configuration based page where you can go say, hey, I want to include this or exclude that, whatever. They look pretty much the same, except for on the view task, we do have the EMPL ID as one of the search fields, because by that point, you would expect to already have an EMPL ID, whereas in the initial stages, you wouldn't have that. So this is just to show you guys the DDA masking, which is demographic data access security, if you guys aren't familiar with it. Okay, now for the form routing, it looks pretty basic. I mean, GT basic is all that we're using. And our first approver step is conditional. So you see that visual if is deep, in blue. So what it does is it looks at a flag to see if it's initiator, like data entered by initiator, and if it's set, then it will skip that first step. After the subject completes the form, it's routed to the approver population, which again is another people code roster. In terms of the form notifications, it's also pretty simple things. I just want to point out a couple of things that are a little bit different. So if you notice the checkbox here of advanced events, I don't think I've seen other our forms using this, but for this particular form, we are using it. And that all that little checkbox allows you to do is select a bunch of additional things within the PeopleSoft workflow framework. And in this particular case, we wanted to trigger a notification as soon as the subject completed their part. And that's what that's doing. The other thing that's interesting about this step is that, well, we are using the SMU guest profile, meaning we don't have, at that level, we don't have an email address associated with it. So there's a notification event hook that is helping us hijack the default behavior for pulling the email address, and instead goes to our form and pulls the email address specified on the form by the initiator, so it's sent to the right person. But everything else is pretty standard. All right, so in terms of the email template, the link URL type has to be set to public. And I've also highlighted like some of the places where we've used some smart sources to pull in the token URL and token expiration date on there. But there's this whole configuration page. It's not really a part of the the token framework or anything. You guys might already be familiar with it. What we had to do was add these additional public entries here for all our databases so that those tokens would have the correct URL constructed. Okay, in terms of our GT basic, so this process ID, this is a delivered page that you can get to through enterprise components, approvals, and approval setup. And what we did here, I just want to show you that we are using actually a custom view. So we took the existing G3 AWE approver view, cloned it so that we would pull camp email address instead of business email address for our forms. And actually this setup for any form that we use that uses the GT basic workflow, it would impact all of them, right? And so the other thing that GT did for us was turn on these push notifications for us. So in case you don't know where that's controlled, it's right here. So you can get those notifications to your notification panel. And this is just a screenshot of that view that we cloned and how we changed it. And that is all we have, guys. What questions can we answer?
You two must have been incredibly thorough.
Yeah, we were the testers in giving them the information, but it's not working. That's all our job was. But yes, they did awesome. Yes. It was a very, very creative solution.
Yeah, that is fantastic.
Yeah, we've been rolling it out now to other populations because we do have a lot of sponsored populations on campus, from like the child center, people and the relish guests to CAPE instructors. I mean, we have so many. And so we have started rolling those out to other people on campus. And our goal is to remove the add update a person security from so many users on campus, because currently it's a lot of people on campus have that. And so we have a lot of dupes in our system due to that problem. So I think we're hoping that this will really help us reduce the number of duplicates and also just have a better way of handling those requests. But of
I
course,
see a couple of.
yeah,
go
so
ahead,
sorry.
Harry. Sorry.
No, so sorry. I was just going to say students and employees, like most employees don't go through this process, right? So there's that. But go ahead.
There are a couple of other questions that have come in. Number one, so in Berkeley's use case, the EMPL ID wasn't created, but a generic account that would tie to the new EMPL ID later. Is that a true statement?
In Berkeley's case, that is true. Berkeley created essentially a dummy account just to get them through the onboarding process before the hire being associated with their actual PeopleSoft account. You can do it either way.
Thanks, Jay. And then another one. So will I need a contract with GT and work with your PeopleSoft group to create something like that? Jay, do you want to comment on that, or Perry? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, SMU's form is very robust, to put it lightly. Yeah, so I think I agree with Perry. I think I concur.
Yeah, and it's something, Diara, if you wanted to reach out to us, we're always more than happy to have those conversations, just give you an idea of what the level of effort and what the level of complexity is or are. You can go ahead and send me an email if you want. That's simply scott@gideontaylor.com.
I will add that just implementing token is not too bad. So if you're asking specifically about guest access, just generally, the token part's pretty easy and we can help pretty quickly with that. The entire form to create the EMPL ID, though, is very involved, as we all saw.
Yeah, that's a very good point. There are a lot of ways that organizations are using the GT token to enable external access to eForms transactions. Yeah, so depending on what your requirements might be, it could be radically different than what you've seen here. All right, then. Well, Perry and Priyanka, thank you very much for sharing that with us. That was fantastic. As I mentioned at the beginning, we will be sending out links to the recording, so you can expect to see those probably sometime next week. We host these lunch and learns typically on a monthly basis, featuring cool things that GT eForms customers are doing with the software. And now that, for those of you who have not been to one, now that you've registered for one, you'll get invitations to those going forward, and we're more than happy to. We'd love to have you join us. And certainly, if there are any questions that you have on today's presentation and specifically on SMU's solution, Priyanka and Perry were kind enough to provide their email addresses right there. Feel free to reach out to them directly. If there's anything that you have questions on with regards to GT eForms, by all means, reach out to Gideon Taylor. We're more than happy to help you understand what you can do with the software and the impact that it can have. That being said, I think we're done.
Great. Thank you so much
Perry,
for having
thank you.
us.
Thank you.
You're very
Thank
welcome.
you.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Have a great rest of the week.